I totally forgot to buy it. As soon as I pressed Jacob, he laughed as if he was having the time of his life. He definitely did it on purpose, not buying a ticket just for me.
Jacob, you're such a klutz.
My mother-in-law, holding her stomach from laughing too hard, called out to Jacob. Everyone was roaring with laughter, and I felt really sick.
That's fine. I'm going home,
I said with a sigh.
Ah, go ahead.
Someone like you wouldn't fit in at a fancy in any way. It's probably for the best, Jacob said with a grin. Don't go splurging on dining out just because you're alone. I'll be checking the receipts later, my mother-in-law said condescendingly with a chuckle.
Well, since that's settled, let's head out.
My father-in-law, looking pleased, called out to Jacob and the others, and they headed towards the boarding gate. How much more could these people look down on me? I'll never forgive them. I took out my smartphone and called someone. Surely, the three of them would regret this. I'm Olivia Williams. I turned 50 this year. Currently, I live with my husband Jacob. We live in close distance but separate from my in-laws, about a 15-minute walk from our house. I met Jacob more than 20 years after becoming a working adult. At my current job, I'm tasked with sales. Lately, I haven't been able to meet my quota, and going to work every day has been depressing. Naturally, my mood has been low. In such circumstances, sales numbers naturally don't follow. Being scolded by my boss for poor sales performance, I grew even more reluctant to go to work. I felt like I was caught in a negative loop. That's when I met Jacob. Our meeting place was the break room in the 10-story building where I worked. This building houses several companies, and there's a shared break room on the 3rd floor. During lunch break, female employees from other floors would eat their brought-from-home lunches there. When I was being scolded by my boss, I often rested in this break room. And today, after being loudly reprimanded by my boss in front of everyone for not meeting my quota. When I was sitting alone on a chair, feeling down, Jacob approached me.
Are you okay? You look kind of down.
Actually. Having been approached by Jacob, whom I'd never met before, I confided in him about my work troubles. Perhaps because he wasn't from the same company, I felt I could talk to him more freely. Jacob listened to me with empathy. After we finished talking, Jacob said to me,
From now on, I'll listen to you. So, let's exchange contact info. Thank you.
I was about to cry from his kindness, but I managed to answer with a smile. I think I had already fallen for Jacob by that time. Jacob and I started getting along better from there. Gradually, we began dating, and after a while, we started a relationship. A year into our relationship, Jacob proposed, and we decided to get married. Right after we got engaged, I met his parents.
Looking forward to having you in the family. About financial help, just do what you can without overextending,
his mother said with a smile, seeming kind. Once you're married to Jacob, let's all go on a trip together, his father said with a hearty laugh. His father seemed like an ordinary guy, which put me at ease. Then, the two of us decided not to have children. I was in my late 40s when I married Jacob. Having a child at this point would be too physically demanding. Plus, Jacob said he wanted to live a life with some financial freedom. I want to take care of my parents too, he mentioned. I also wanted to focus on my career, so I happily agreed to his proposal. And so, we bought a new house together. We pooled our savings for the purchase, so it was a small house, but we could afford to pay in full. We would become even happier from there. I believed that. However, I came to realize that was all an illusion. I've been frequently troubled by my in-laws since we got married. For example, their sudden visits. Since Jacob and I started living in our new house, his parents would come over without any notice. Then, they'd point out in detail how I was lacking as a housewife. At worst, they'd rummage through our fridge or closets without permission and scrutinize everything. And then scream at me. What's with this fridge? Only the cheapest beef from the supermarket? Is this what you feed Jacob? His mother would scream as soon as she opened the fridge today too.
What can I say to that?
We had spent our savings on buying the house in one go. So we were trying to save money where we could. So, I was at a loss when his mother complained. I had no choice but to endure her criticisms. Then, one day, his parents were over at our place again today. His mother, as usual, brought a large paper bag, intending to take something back with her. Initially, his parents would come empty-handed, but after a few visits, they started bringing large paper bags. And they took away a bunch of groceries and household items every time. Everything they took was paid for out of my pocket. I grew increasingly uncomfortable with his parents' lack of restraint. As I was puzzled by his parents' behavior, his mother grabbed a dress from my closet.
What's this dress? It looks expensive. Wasting money again. Ah, that's...
I couldn't help but raise my voice. His mother was holding my dress, flaunting it. Seeing that dress, I turned pale.
Mom, please don't open it without permission. And that dress was a birthday gift from my mother. Please, give it back.
I pleaded desperately to get my dress back from her. Actually, this dress was something my mother had always treasured. For work, my mother would wear branded dresses when visiting clients. This dress was given to me by my mother, saying, "You're at a good age now, Olivia. It's time for you to become a dignified woman like me." That's why I couldn't let my mother-in-law take it. But she just smirked when she saw the dress.
It's too early for you to have such a nice dress.
I'll wear it for you. You should be grateful.
How can you say that? It was a birthday present from my mother.
I felt like crying. Then, Jacob, having watched the whole thing, laughed and said, "Mom's offering to wear it for you, you should be grateful. You're a part of the Williams family now.
Listening to Mom is part of your duties as a wife, right?"
Jacob always used part of the Williams family to try and get me to give in. It wasn't the first time. The first weekend after we got married, when I was summoned to do weeding at his parents' house early in the morning, Jacob said the same thing.
It's a tradition for the Williams family wives, so get on with it.
Jacob acted as if he was someone of higher status by virtue of his family. But I didn't want to give up the dress. As I stayed silent in frustration, my father-in-law authoritatively declared,
"Jacob did you a favor by marrying an older bride like you. Since we can't even see our grandchild's face, the least you can do is show us some filial piety, right?"
Even though they call me older, I'm the same age as Jacob. I felt irritated by my father-in-law's double standards.
Exactly, Dad's right. So, hand over the dress to Mom.
Jacob nodded as if it was the most natural thing.
This is terrible.
There was no one on my side in this family. No matter what I said, I was made out to be the villain. My mother-in-law happily put the dress in her bag. So, begrudgingly, I gave in to Jacob and his parents' demands. But the problem wasn't just with his parents. Jacob himself was a significant issue. Lately, Jacob has been coming home late and not eating dinner together has become the norm.
I'm home.
Today, too, Jacob came home in high spirits at 1 a.m. He must have been drinking. His face was flushed. "Welcome back." I greeted Jacob with a puzzled look. But he didn't seem to care and spoke to me.
"I'm gonna take a bath. Can you put away my bag for me?"
Jacob handed me his bag and went straight to the bathroom. It's always like this. I sighed and went to put his bag in his room. That's when I heard the notification sound from his smartphone. Jacob left his smartphone in the bag again. Jacob always carries his smartphone with him, but it seems he forgot it in his bag because he was drunk. If it's an urgent work call, it would be serious. I carefully took the smartphone out of his bag. And when I looked at the screen, I froze.
What is this?
Displayed on the screen was a woman's name, Sophia.
Today was fun with Jacob. But it got late, isn't your wife gonna find out? Sophia's worried.
Reading that message, I was convinced Jacob was cheating. Then, I saw many more messages from Sophia. Some were quite explicit, and it became clear Jacob had been cheating for a long time. With a blank expression, I started taking pictures of the smartphone screen, one after another. This was proof of Jacob's affair, and I thought it would be useful if needed. But this alone wasn't enough evidence. I sighed. Besides, I'm already 50, and it would be hard to remarry if I left Jacob. We don't have kids, and the thought of being alone from now on is mentally tough. What should I do now? Holding Jacob's phone in my hand, I felt utterly lost. Then one day, Jacob said to me,
"This year's parents' anniversary is coming up soon. Get started on planning the trip, will you?"
Jacob looked at me as if it was obvious that I should be the one to do it. All right. I could only nod in response to Jacob. Every year, we gift a trip to his parents for their anniversary. Of course, Jacob and I also go along, entertaining his parents. We've been booking the same in every year, and I intended to book it this year too. But the next moment, Jacob suggested something unexpected.
"Yeah, since it's their 50th anniversary this year. Book something special, will you?"
I was puzzled. Even the usual inn is quite upscale. And I pay for the inn expenses from my salary. Jacob told me, paying for the trip is the wife's role in showing filial piety. My role is to make them happy by enjoying myself there. So, booking a more expensive inn would be a greater burden on me. Seeing my confusion, Jacob said irritably,
"It's their 50th anniversary, you know? Don't you have any respect for my parents?"
Jacob continued to drone on about how I lacked the awareness of being a good wife. Tired of Jacob's preaching, I just said, "All right," and ended the conversation. When thinking of a higher grade inn, only one came to mind. And its reservation process was a bit unique. After successfully making the reservation, I spoke to Jacob.
"I've booked the inn."
Jacob smirked and taunted.
"Better be an inn that meets my standards. Won't accept it if it's shabby."
Jacob looked like he was finding fault on purpose with a malicious face. I sighed at Jacob and responded,
"It's a distance away by plane, but it's a respectable inn. See, you should be satisfied with this," showing him the inn's homepage on my phone. Jacob nodded in satisfaction. "Well, this passes. Have you booked the flight?"
"Not yet. It shouldn't be crowded around this time, and it's a weekday." "I don't think there will be any problem with booking the flight," I answered, and Jacob said something unexpected.
"I'll book the flight for us."
That is a sudden offer from Jacob, who had never lifted a finger before. I was surprised and asked,
"Really?"
Jacob smiled brightly.
"Yeah. You've always been doing so much, Olivia. I can at least handle booking the flight. Thanks for everything." "Thank you."
I sincerely thanked Jacob. I thought Jacob was finally starting to cooperate. Maybe Jacob was beginning to change. I was hopeful. However, my decision at this moment would greatly shake things up. On the day of the trip, Jacob went ahead to pick up his parents, so I was supposed to meet them at the airport.
"Sorry to keep you waiting."
As I appeared with mine and Jacob's luggage, they were already at the meeting spot. And for some reason, Jacob and his parents were grinning. I had a bad feeling about this. As I thought this and looked at Jacob and his parents' hands, they each had a plane ticket. I asked Jacob,
"Can I have my plane ticket too?"
Then, Jacob said something unbelievable the next moment.
"I forgot to buy it."
Jacob was laughing as if it was amusing.
"Just mine."
I couldn't believe it and asked Jacob. "Yeah, I bought for my parents, though," he said, still grinning. That attitude made me realize he definitely did it on purpose, not buying a ticket just for me.
"Jacob, you're such a klutz."
His mother, holding her stomach from laughing too hard, called out to him. Everyone was laughing uproariously, and I really felt sick.
"That's fine. I'll just go home,"
I said with a sigh.
Go ahead. Someone like you wouldn't fit in at a fancy inn anyway.
It's probably for the best," Jacob said with a grin.
Don't go splurging on dining out just because you're alone. I'll be checking the receipts later.
His mother said condescendingly with a chuckle.
Well, since that's settled, let's head out.
His father said cheerfully, calling to Jacob and the others, and they headed towards the boarding gate. How much more could these people look down on me? I'll never forgive them. I took out my smartphone and called someone. Then, I immediately purchased a ticket for a different flight than Jacob and his parents. Surely, the three of them would regret this. At 3 p.m. that evening, I received a call. My phone was on silent, so it didn't ring, but it was Jacob. Just as I thought. I smirked and ignored the call. Actually, the flight Jacob and his parents were on was a morning flight. Check-in was at 3 p.m., so they were probably going to enjoy some sightseeing upon arrival. I went ahead to the fancy inn we were supposed to stay at, leaving Jacob and his parents behind. And there, I approached a certain person waiting at the fancy inn.
Mom. Sorry for the sudden visit.
The person was my mother. I apologized to her as soon as I saw her.
Olivia, what on earth are you doing? We finally booked this high-grade inn. And now you're saying you can't stay all of a sudden?
My mother asked, looking exasperated. Actually, I told my mother about everything Jacob and his parents had done. And I also told her that my mother-in-law had taken the dress she gave me. Then, my mother, with a clearly angry face, declared,
I will not forgive this. And we're getting that dress back.
And so, my mother and I devised a plan. We earnestly pleaded with the innkeeper for her cooperation. Once we had a rough plan in place, Jacob and his parents arrived at the inn. I spotted Jacob and discreetly hid behind the front desk. Unaware of me, Jacob, with a smile on his face, proceeded to check in. His parents, in a good mood, were right behind him.
We have a reservation at 3 p.m. under the name Williams. The wife is not visible, though.
The innkeeper responded with a puzzled look. The reservation was made under my full name. So, it was natural for the innkeeper to say this. Jacob, seemingly understanding, didn't show any suspicion. He proudly informed.
My wife suddenly couldn't make it due to illness. But there's no issue, right? Someone else will join later, so we won't cancel any guests.
Although I had a hunch who that someone else might be, I stayed silent and listened. The innkeeper then smiled at Jacob and delivered a shocking statement. If the wife is not present, it's not possible to use the reservation.
What?
Jacob and his parents froze at the innkeeper's sudden declaration. And then Jacob kept calling me. He was probably out of confusion. The first to regain composure, his mother approached the innkeeper, demanding.
What do you mean it's not possible? Olivia made the reservation, and we've come all this way by plane.
His mother looked visibly confused.
We're here for a celebration today. So, please, can you make an exception? Jacob pleaded with the innkeeper.
The innkeeper sighed. Well, if you insist. But you'll pay the additional charge, right?
What? What additional charge?
Jacob asked, surprised. The innkeeper glanced at a woman sitting nearby. Mrs. Maybe it's time to tell them the truth.
Indeed, I'll handle this. Thank you.
At the exchange between the innkeeper and the woman, his mother looked puzzled. Who is that woman? Wearing dark sunglasses and all. She began, but then she stopped mid-sentence. Because she recognized the woman. Isn't that Olivia's mother? Why is she here? His mother said, confused. My mother and his parents had only met at a family-only wedding. My mother smiled and replied.
It's been a while. By the way, where is my Olivia? She couldn't come due to illness.
Jacob tried to persist with his lie to my mother. My mother sighed at Jacob.
Don't lie. Olivia sounded just fine when I called her earlier. Plus, this inn was booked using my company's privilege. If she's not here, you'll have to pay the standard rate.
At my mother's mention of my company, Jacob and his parents started to look really confused.
Maybe a 70% increase? Can you afford that, Jacob? My mother chuckled. What are you talking about with your company? Olivia didn't mention any privilege. And she didn't say anything about you coming.
Jacob spoke with confusion. He was likely overwhelmed by the barrage of information. His mother also addressed my mother.
Are you talking about a corporate benefit from your company? Even for lower-level employees? Must be a small company to have such generous benefits.
Her sharp words made my mother's brow furrow. I hadn't talked much about my mother to Jacob or his parents. Since they never asked for details, I never brought it up. So, their shock at my mother's next words was understandable. Me? I'm the president of Kia Group. Olivia is in line to be the next president, my mother said with a smile. Kia Group, as in the major corporation, his mother exclaimed loudly. Jacob and his father were visibly stunned. Kia Group is one of the leading travel agencies in the country. They were managing inns and restaurants among other ventures. In fact, this inn is under our group. That allowed us to use it at a significant discount. Kia Group is a family business, with leadership passed down through our lineage. And the current president of Kia Group is my mother.
Jacob, I know where Olivia works, but it's not Kia Group. Are you trying to deceive us with lies?
Jacob glared at my mother. Jacob and I work in different companies within the same building. That is why he made that comment. My mother laughed heartily, finding the situation amusing. That company is just a temporary assignment. Olivia is indeed part of Kia Group. She's done with her training and is planning to return to the headquarters the year after next, she said, tossing her business card to Jacob. Jacob turned pale as he looked at the card.
You really are the president of Kia Group?
Jacob trembled slightly. His parents also turned pale. His father, now living off his pension, used to work before retirement. He seemed to have been a middle management employee at a mid-sized company, retiring as a department head, according to Jacob. The difference in status between my mother, a major corporation's president, and his father was stark. Then my mother continued her attack. That dress. I gave it to Olivia. Why are you wearing it? It's my special outfit, she said, glaring at the mother-in-law.
I'm so sorry. I'll take it off right now.
The mother-in-law turned pale and hurriedly looked for a place where she could change. She quickly changed and returned the dress to my mother.
If there's even a slight unraveling, expect a repair bill. Yes.
His mother replied meekly. Then, as if remembering something, Jacob muttered.
I need to tell Sophia not to come here.
My mother didn't react. But I caught the whisper. Stepping out from behind the front desk, I shouted.
Sophia won't be coming. Olivia? Why are you here? I called you so many times.
Jacob was clearly rattled. His mother was just as shocked and let out a scream, Olivia. You didn't have a ticket, and they even took your dress. Quick as ever, my mother interjected, the dress was originally Olivia's, not yours. His father was also greatly flustered. Kia Group, that's a bigger company than where I worked. And to think she was the president, he was disheartened. Being a person of high pride, it must have hurt him mentally.
I came on a different flight. To get revenge on Jacob and his family.
I smiled mischievously.
So, Sophia not coming is because... I made sure she wouldn't come. I called her right after Jacob and his parents took off this morning.
That day I discovered Jacob's affair through his phone. I secretly went to a private investigator and requested an investigation. With the results, I got Sophia's contact information. I had been planning to talk to Sophia directly someday, but I took this opportunity to call her. After our conversation, Sophia made a decision. I calmly told Jacob the truth.
Sophia has decided to break up with you. When I contacted her about the compensation, she apologized. I was only after the money with Jacob, she said. I was never serious about an old guy like him.
Turns out, Sophia is only 30 years old. Her reason for dating Jacob who is 20 years her senior, was money. She was attracted to the idea of being treated to meals and receiving brand items from Jacob. Sophia had said clearly,
Jacob inviting me to the trip with his parents made me think it was time to end things. I never wanted to marry him.
Hearing this, Jacob was shocked.
That's a lie, right? I was even considering divorce to be with Sophia.
Jacob. His mother consoled the stunned Jacob. His father also showed sympathy towards Jacob. My mother and I looked at them with a disdainful expression. Then I made my final decision regarding Jacob.
I'm going to divorce Jacob too. From now on, you're free to love anyone, not just Sophia.
The moment I mentioned divorce, Jacob protested.
I have no intention of getting a divorce. It's meaningless without Sophia. I'll never sign the divorce papers because there's no conclusive evidence of the affair.
His mother agreed with him.
That's right. We won't accept a divorce. After all, Olivia is the future president of Kia Group, right? You'll live an even wealthier life.
Her eyes gleamed disgustingly with excitement. His father seemed pleased too. He was likely thinking of receiving financial support from me. But I won't let things go their way. My mother also glared at them.
How about you take a look at this?
I handed Jacob and his parents the investigator's report. The evidence was damning. Photos included were incontrovertible proof. Perhaps overwhelmed by the undeniable evidence, Jacob and his parents turned even paler.
How could this? Why?
Seeing them, I let out a scoff.
As a condition for waiving Sophia's compensation, she agreed to testify favorably for me in the divorce case with Jacob. I'm looking forward to what Sophia will testify if it goes to court.
I chuckled, and Jacob was ashen-faced. His face filled with despair. His parents looked as if they had been plunged into the abyss. I had no intention of forgiving Jacob and his parents. I was ready to fight them to the bitter end, ensuring they fell into hell. Eventually, my divorce from Jacob was finalized. Jacob resisted to the end, but ultimately gave in.
I'll apologize as many times as it takes, just please spare me the divorce. If I had known you were the future president of Kia Group, I would never have cheated.
He says this, clinging on to me. But I showed no mercy. I got a top-notch lawyer introduced by my mother and confronted him with evidence of his infidelity. Left speechless by the evidence, Jacob could say nothing.
If things continue this way, it might go to court. Maybe I should increase the compensation amount?
I suggested, turning Jacob's face pale.
I'm sorry.
With that, Jacob hurriedly signed the divorce papers. Despite all his resistance, in the end, it was anticlimactic. I hadn't demanded compensation from Sophia, but she ended up losing her job. Actually, Sophia worked for a partner of the Kia Group, so my mother had spoken to the partner.
This isn't what we agreed on.
Sophia was said to be crying, but I didn't care. Surely, Sophia would struggle with job hunting from now on. And after divorcing Jacob, the troubles continued. Jacob and his parents started ambushing me in front of my workplace. Apparently, Jacob's misconduct became known to his company because of the divorce. Jacob had been involved with several women besides Sophia. Some were involved with him for promotions. However, my mother exposed all of Jacob's actions through her connections with the president of Jacob's company. Upon hearing this, the president was furious, and Jacob received a demotion. This led to a wave of internal complaints against Jacob. Some even considered filing formal complaints. Eventually, Jacob felt too uncomfortable to stay at his job and resigned, becoming unemployed. And he became unemployed. However, his parents were retired and living on pensions, unable to support an unemployed Jacob. His mother had always been a homemaker, and his father retired as a middle manager. They didn't have a high income or a sufficient pension. Without me, they couldn't afford their luxuries anymore. That led them to ambush me in collaboration with Jacob.
What a mess!
I consulted the police, but they didn't act immediately. However, a decisive moment occurred. One day, as I tried to enter my workplace, ignoring the ambushing Jacob and his parents, Jacob approached and grabbed my arm.
It hurts. Let go.
But Jacob wouldn't release his grip, getting cocky because we kept quiet. We're struggling without money. Marry me again and support us, Jacob said, pushing a marriage registration form at me.
You just need to sign. Do it quickly for our sake.
His mother also grabbed my arm, forcing me to hold a pen.
No use trying to escape.
I was cornered by his father as well, with no way to flee.
Enough already.
Just when I was in trouble, a voice called out.
You all! Enough is enough!
My mother said sternly.
Mom!
Relieved by my mother's presence, tears welled up in my eyes. She had always been there to help me. Security. This way, she said, calling for the guards.
Yikes!
Panicked, his parents ran off. Their appearance was pitiful.
What about me?
Jacob's cry echoed alone. Thus, Jacob was apprehended by the security guard and handed over to the police. The marks where Jacob had grabbed my arm were clearly visible. That also led me to file a report of the incident this time. The in-laws had fled, but they would likely be contacted by the police eventually. Jacob and his in-laws had acted in a way that cost them their social credibility. Without jobs, their future looks bleak. Since then, I have returned to the headquarters of the Kia Group. Jacob's whereabouts have been unknown after that incident. He seems to have fled to avoid arrest by the police. The in-laws returned to their home. The police visited them there to inquire about the situation voluntarily. For my safety, I changed my workplace. Although I could have continued my assignment at the previous company, I was supposed to return next year anyway. My mother decided it wouldn't be a problem to return now. Since coming back to the Kia Group headquarters, my days have been hectic. During my assignment, I was involved in sales, accounting, planning, and various other departments. I thought I had gained a fair amount of experience, but the scale at the headquarters of the Kia Group is entirely different. The figures involved in any given task are on a different level, keeping me constantly on edge. However, I have a strong ally by my side. Olivia. We're going to visit our clients. You need to get your face remembered quickly, my mother calls out to me.
I'm coming.
I hurry after my mother. This busyness helps me forget the painful past with Jacob and his family. And for my mother, who has been there for me during tough times, I feel nothing but gratitude. To repay her, I keep moving forward every day.